So good morning and welcome everyone to this third session in our series, Lead Successfully Through Challenging Times. Just out of curiosity, if this is the first of the 4 sessions that you've attended, if you want to type the word first into the chat, I'm just curious how many of you are joining us today for the first time. I'm Sophie Oberstein from the Center for Leadership and Organizational Change, and I'm here today with my colleagues, the Director, Laura Scott, and Associate Director of CLOC, Adrian Hamke-Wicker. And you'll hear more from them later on in today's session. We are recording today's session for those who could not attend in person. And again, if you want to, as we get started, you could open your chat and type in the name of your department. That would be terrific. And welcome especially to those 3 of you who said this is the first time you've been with us today. I will give a few moments to put it all into context, and then we'll get into today's topic. We created this series because we are in challenging times. And so some of the things that help us lead during regular times or the pre-COVID times need to be enhanced or reminded in these times of working from home, reactions to systematic inequality, uncertainty around budgets, around unemployment rates, COVID, et cetera. So first of all, we thank you for joining us, whether it's your first time, your second, or your third, in the midst of all that's going on around us. And we hope that you're going to leave here today with some tools to help yourself and to help your colleagues navigate this complicated context. The tools that we're using, however, are not specific to these times. We're actually focusing our series on the Gallup organization's 4 needs of followers. These are the ways that effective leaders can show up at all times. And it's based on a study Gallup conducted in the mid-2000s. For 3 years, they studied a random sample of over 10,000 people from all sectors of employment. And they asked these people, who is a leader who has had the most positive influence on your daily life? And then once they identified those people, they asked for 3 words to describe what that leader gave them. And this was not a multiple choice test. This was a free form question about what are those words. And in analyzing the response, Gallup discovered some commonalities and some words that popped up most frequently. And these 4 special words have become Gallup's 4 needs of followers framework: trust, compassion, stability, and hope. And that is what we organized our series around. These 4 are not in any order. They're all extremely important. They're important at all times, not just in these times, but certainly having kind of a reminder of how important they are in these times is critical. And also they overlap, and we'll actually touch on that more today than we have in other sessions, because there are some concepts and some strategies that work to build trust and to build hope, to build stability and to build hope. So we'll see how that happens. Today's session, oh, actually, sorry. Those of you who were with us before, we do ask you at the end to think about something you might want to do related to the session's topic. So if you were here last time talking about compassion and there is something you want to share with us that we can celebrate with you, please put in the chat how that one meaningful thing that you've done in the past week to offer compassion. We'll take a look at those as we go. Today, however, we are here to talk about stability. And the way this is formatted, for those of you who are new, is that I will talk in general about the concept for about 15 minutes, and then I turn it over to Laura and Adrian, who relate those concepts to our current situation. There's time for your questions. And questions come to us through the chat, so please put your questions in the chat at that point when I ask for them, or at any time, because I'll scroll through when we get to that portion of the program and we'll look at the questions that have already been submitted. So go ahead and put those in. Also, if you, we will send you a copy of the slides following the session, so you don't need to take extensive notes as we go, but feel free to write down whatever does stick with you that you want to remember. So let me open the conversation about stability by asking you two questions. The first is, and these are questions for you to answer in the chat. The first is, who do you look to for stability in times of change or crisis? Who do you look to for stability? I'm seeing someone say mentors. Yeah, and here are the answers that I would expect to see. A lot of people are typing in leaders and supervisors, or I'm the one who provides the stability, maybe as a leader. Some people look to their collective team. Daniel mentioned that. But most times, some people are saying longtime friends, a spouse. Yeah. Yeah, so outside of work, we have some trusted sources that we're looking to for stability. Inside of work, we're either looking to our teams or we're looking often to our leaders. So when you look to these people for stability or in these times of change and crisis, how do you want them to behave? What are you looking for? How do you want those people that you are turning to be behaving? So William says to be having conversations. Ryan says to be adaptable. Adrian's added encouragement. I'm looking for assurance. I'm looking for information. Lucy says, I'm looking for them to listen, to make gentle suggestions. John asks for thoughtful, measured action. We see a lot of listening, sounding boards, advice, encouragement. Great, and calm, rational worldview. Thank you for that. So I think that some of those words that you just described are the kind of things that are part of the definition of stability, which highlights the idea of composure and equilibrium. It doesn't exactly say being a soundboard or listening, but it really talks about composure. And so maybe someone you can talk to who just remains calm and composed. It is really hard for people to get their work done on a day-to-day basis when they have real insecurity about where the organization is heading or even whether their jobs are secure. So in these kinds of times, they look to leaders for poise, that calm that someone mentioned in the chat. And they're looking for an Olympic calm. So Olympic calm is a term that was coined by Winston Churchill's wife, Clementine, in this letter. As Churchill was leading the UK through World War II, she advised that he display Olympic calm. And that's what people need in these times of war, in that case, or of crisis. And finally, you know, they're looking to you they're trying to get their emotional cue from you. Just like on an airplane, when there's turbulence, you're listening for the captain to say something, or you're looking at the crew to see, how worried should I be about this turbulence? We're trying to get an indication of whether this is an acceptable amount of turbulence or not. We're looking for that kind of composure and calm. So we are going to offer you today some strategies for creating inner stability within yourself, because it's hard for people like these flight attendants to maintain an outward appearance of calm if inside they're not feeling that. It's not impossible for them to do it. It's like the duck gliding along the water where it's smooth on the outside, but underneath it's paddling frantically. That happens, but it's kind of easier if they're not paddling frantically and if they can be calm themselves. So we'll talk about internal stability as well as external stability. How do you help your colleagues maintain their calm? So you probably already have some great strategies that you use to maintain calm yourself in stressful situations, or maybe not even in stressful situations, whatever it is that you use to maintain your own inner turbulence. Can you, once more, put into the chat some of the things that you're doing to quiet your own inner turbulence? You know, and I know that in these times of COVID, my husband's working from home. He'll take a walk to calm his inner turbulence. I'm more about just sitting still for a few moments. I'm seeing some people say step back, breathe, a lot of breathing, outdoor time in gardening or jogging, listening to music. You know, Eric says, I'm not doing this enough, but going outside or walking. Heidi says, just trying to think rationally about the situation. Yeah, and actually Eric's comment saying, I don't do this enough, is reminding me that, you know, if nothing else comes from today's workshop, maybe it's just saying, can I do one more thing to take care of my own inner turbulence? We would be happy if you took away nothing more than just that. But let me give you some other strategies to go with that. So beyond those great ideas that you already have and that you're already using, breathing, walking, noticing, we're going to share with you a series of questions that you can walk yourself through, adapted from a coach and author named Rick Carson, that can help you calm your own inner turbulence. By the way, this series of questions can also be asked of your colleagues to help them calm their own inner turbulence. And to demonstrate them, I'm going to ask these questions of Laura about something that's recently created some inner turmoil, I believe, for her. So I'm just going to go down the list, and you know, it's a little artificial because it's not in the real world, but it will give you an idea of how this can be very impactful. So Laura, what is the belief that you're holding on to that might be causing inner turbulence?
I realized recently that as I'm thinking and hearing more about budget cuts and financial difficulties at the university, the belief I'm holding on to is that it will happen the same way it happened last time, which in our case was for us to actually be entirely zeroed out on our budget. Obviously, we came back from that, but that we had no say in it, and we had no voice in deciding how it would happen. That somehow this was going to, you know, we'd be called into a room and told this, and that would be that.
Right. So how do you feel about that? It being done the same way it has been done in the past.
I found myself feeling really hopeless, like it just didn't matter what any of us did, and angry and unappreciated. Like it was, it felt, it had a real blow on my self-esteem. Yeah.
Yeah. So no matter what you do, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So what's true about that belief?
It's true that it could technically happen. I mean, I don't have the power to stop it from happening. And it's true that we're still in a really unknown stage. So we don't know how bad this will get, and we really don't know how it will turn out.
Okay. What's untrue about this belief?
What I feel like is really untrue about it is that was a long time ago. We did a different kind of work. We had a different kind of relationship with folks on campus. And at the time, we were not self-support. We were fully, our full budget came from state money from the provost's office. And none of that is true now.
Okay, so things could be different. What's important?
I think what's important is to think about, is to not get so so emotionally devastated by the thought of what could happen that we're unable to move. We have to be moving in a way that makes it less and less likely that this would happen to us. So it's important to stay connected to the current reality and like the other stuff. I'm a duck. This washes over my back. Yeah.
Right, right. So some beliefs people like to hold on to because it actually is serving them in some way or another. You're walking around with this belief that things are going to roll out exactly the same way as they did in the past. That's what you started with. Is that a belief you'd like to replace with something different? And if so, what belief do you want to replace this one with?
I think I've been working to think about that we are not powerless victims here, that in fact we can architect how things turn out, and we need to be working on that. Okay. I'm working on that.
Thank you. Yes, so as I said, not exactly natural because it wasn't happening in real time, but thank you, Laura, for sharing a real situation and being open and honest about that, and showing us how maybe working through those questions can reframe things in your mind. So someone had said before, thinking rationally about a situation, you know, that question, what's untrue about this belief, can really help us think more rationally, because it makes us say, wait a second, let me think about this. What's really happening? What's really going on? What can be changed? So these are some tips, the ones you came up with before that you're just going to maybe recommit to, and also maybe this series of questions to help tame your inner turbulence. How about outer turbulence? How do you help calm down those around you? And the literature about stability, you know, continues to point to these four things: giving them a desired future state to aim for, helping to create new routines, establishing operating principles, and not over-promising. So let me go quickly into each of those. So I was searching for photos to illustrate this point and came up with this one, which is, you know, I kind of hesitated because I was like, well, it's not work-related, it's a little cheesy, but it sort of does really illustrate what we're talking about here. If the foreground is fuzzy, if things right now are unclear or blurry, and I don't have a picture in the background, something clear, it's harder for me. Like if you even put your hand up and block out that picture in the background and all you see is that blurry stuff, you can feel unstable, uncertain, and it's harder. But when you can see a desired future state, it can help you create some momentum. If you can't see what's straight in the fuzziness, when there's something in the background, you can focus on that. You can write yourself out. Adrienne may speak more about this, but she shared with me some research from the field of appreciative inquiry, which says that human systems move in the direction of their images of the future. So the more positive and hopeful the image of the future, the more positive the present day action. And this is one of the places I said we're going to bleed into a little bit of next week, because when I was saying, you know, you have to be hopeful for the future, we are going to talk about hope next time in our next and final session. But a desired future state is also one way to help create stability. Another way is to establish routines. Routines help with uncertainty because they're something you can count on. They happen regularly. That's what a routine is. They help people to pivot. So whether that's having more regular meetings, knowing in those meetings you'll have a regular chance to check in, whether those meetings are both social and work related. So the more you can establish something regular in people's calendars that they can count on, the more it will help people to feel stability. The other thing you can establish are some operating principles. You may not have all the answers that employees are craving in these times. You know, how am I going to be safe? Am I going to have to come back to work in the middle of a pandemic? Will my salary be cut? Will I be furloughed? Will I lose my job? You know, big, important questions that you may not have the answers to. But you don't have to have all the answers to provide stability. What people need to be able to predict is not the future, but predict how you are going to respond to things. What's your kind of frame of mind that's stable and consistent? Maybe that calm is Olympic calm. It's just throughout everything you do, something they can rely on. Or how you're approaching problems, your operating principles, how you are going to address whatever it is that comes your way can remain consistent regardless of what it is that comes your way. So these are some sample operating principles. And you do need to pick one because sometimes they contradict each other. The last two say our primary responsibility is to keep our staff members safe. Some organizations, teams will operate with that as their operating principle, or others will say our primary responsibility is to be there for our students. And do those two fit together? They can, but your team members, your colleagues want to know what's guiding you in these times. So we want to be kind of explicit about what our operating principles are in these times. And finally, we want to be careful of overpromising. We want to provide stability, but we don't want to set false expectations because those will erode trust. There are some really kind and optimistic reasons to say the kinds of things that are on the left, like I'm going to tell you everything that's going on as it happens, or we're going to get all the resources and support we need to do this thing. But the trouble comes when you can't deliver on that, or when they hear something that you didn't share with them, even if it was an accidental oversight, then they say, wait, she said she was going to tell me everything that was going on as it happened, and I didn't hear this as it happened, so now it erodes trust. It goes back to something Laura said last week about, kind of when you state that you're going to make your number one concern this, our people and their safety, and then something happens that doesn't fit with that. It's worse than if you had said nothing to begin with. So be careful in these times to create stability by not overpromising. So with those strategies in mind, I'm going to expand this conversation to include Laura and Adrian, who will go a little deeper on these concepts. Again, if you have questions as they're speaking or questions about anything I've already shared, please feel free to put them in the chat because we will go from this discussion into a question and answer period. So Laura, Adrian?
Thank you so much. Sophie, something just occurred to me that hadn't been in our earlier conversations, and it's because I just got a warning that my internet connection may be unstable, which I realize is happening to me a lot these days. And I was thinking about this the other day as I was watching, cable news, how people speaking from their homes and speaking by phone, and how unstable it is and how bad it sounds, and how a year ago we would not have put up with that. A year ago, our expectation was that people communicated clearly and everybody's technology was perfect, and how quickly my standards reset themselves. Like, oh, you're breaking up, but that's okay. I can figure this out. And what I found I'm doing literally is being ready to repeat myself because it froze in the middle or something. Making sure that people are actually hearing what I'm saying, because it's harder. You can't see all of me. You don't get the cues. And literally, if it's freezing up a little bit, you're literally missing some of the things that I was saying. And also being casual about things. Sometimes you have to be much more precise and formal than I'm used to being, just to make sure that everything's clear to everybody, which is literally something that just occurred to me and not what I was thinking about talking about, which is what I've noticed in these work from home and pandemic times. One thing that a lot of people on campus have told me is that they feel like they're being included in meetings and conversations and decisions that they weren't normally, they hadn't been a part of before. And that includes me. So I'm in meetings where bigger decisions are being talked about and progress on larger items like how we're going to handle budget cuts are being discussed. And I've realized that the sort of cascading of information, where things start at the top and they get cascaded down, which in the past I've sometimes said, why can't they just tell us all at the same time? Why can't we all hear the same message? And I've realized that that sort of the benefit of the way it's done is because it offers leaders a chance to literally manage their emotions, to manage their emotional response to what they hear before they roll it out to anyone else. So that if your first instinctive reaction is, what the heck? This isn't fair, or why are they doing this and telling us this? I mean, you can see it in people's faces in some of these conversations. They have time to process all that before they turn around and give the message to someone else. And I think that's such a critical part, particularly in times like this, of having that built-in buffer. And sometimes it's not built in the same way, like with an extra meeting that's being put in there. So some of the things I've done in coaching with folks is to help them figure out how to construct their own buffer, which is what's the way you're going to teach yourself to have poker face? Does it involve breathing? Does it involve, I had one woman who just instinctively like clutched her pearls. And I said, okay, well, that's your instinct. Is there a way we can do that that looks calming? It looks like you're considering something and taking it in and breathing rather than shrieking and clutching your pearls. So what can you develop that is your own way to get to poker face to build in visible stability for the folks that you're working with?
I would like to add a little bit to that conversation. We talked in our session last week about some of the needs of our brain for managing threat. And one of them is certainty, right? Our brains have a need for things to be certain, to be able to predict what's going to happen. And that is not what's happening in our world right now. Everything is completely uncertain. And related to that, you know, people are looking to us as leaders for that stability. So we can't necessarily provide certainty, but we can provide stability. And I think a really practical way to do that is to think about how can you be predictable. So you can provide stability by practicing predictability for folks. So if people know that you are going to behave and act and think in a certain way, then they can predict that and they can trust that and use that to help them sort of manage through their own uncertainty. So I think the concept that I've been trying to do is practicing predictability as a way to actualize bringing stability to the people that I interact with on campus.
I want to tag on to that, Adrienne, when you're talking about the brain and recognizing the negative bias of the brain. The brain is always looking for threats, so much more so than rewards. Threats are so much stickier in our brains. And two things come out of that. And the first is to realize that calm is much harder to spread than panic. You think about that, you know, it takes a whole lot of people displaying calm for that to spread, whereas it only really takes a couple for panic to blow up. So remembering that in how you're approaching things. And again, the second is that it takes more deliberative effort and strategies and practice. And secondly, if you catastrophize, I'll own that. I tend like, what's the worst possible thing I could make out of this news I've just heard? So if you catastrophize, you have to be aware that doing so visibly, it sets that in stone for people. It's like, you know, indelible in the hippocampus. Alarm and catastrophe makes some memory permanent and indelible, and it's much harder to walk it back into calm than if you had not catastrophized in the first place.
Sophie, do we have time for Laura to talk about Suzanne Kreider's thermostat, or are we running low on time? Because I think that would be great to bring that up.
No, I think we have time for that, and then maybe we'll switch over to questions.
Okay.
Thanks, Adrienne. One of the very first things that we learned as an organization when we were first looking at neuroscience in the brain and what that has to do with behavior was from a woman named Suzanne Kreider, and she was the first sort of neuroscientist, neurobiologist that we worked with, and she had this concept of emotional heat. So if you think of this as a thermostat, you know, from 0 to 100 degrees, there's a comfort zone that everyone has. I don't know what it is in your house. It's my house that can't go lower than 72. It can't go above 76. Like I have a comfort zone for the environment, that thinking of people having a comfort zone for emotional heat, that you don't want to be way below 72. You don't want to be cold, unmoving, unfeeling. You also don't want to be above 76. You want to keep it comfortable so that it's safe for folks. And for me, that for example, automatically rules out yelling. Any yelling raises the temperature above 76 degrees. I don't care how alarming the news is. For me, it has to stay below 76. And above 72 is not responding when someone is talking is too cold for me. It needs to be, you know, in this tighter frame so that everyone is comfortable enough to perform in the way they need to be performing. That capture, Adrienne?
Yes, perfect.
I mean, yeah. Okay. The last piece, and I can talk about this when we talk about home next week, but thinking about stability is literally a balance between candor and hope, because you have to have both. And I've seen it said that great leaders have a balance between candor and hope, and that the tendency most folks have, I know I have it, is to favor one or the other. Favoring one or the other and not having good balance is sort of a mediocre leader. Vacillating wildly and unpredictably between the two is a horrible leader. And that's absolutely, if you can't get completely to balance, what you do want to avoid is the vacillating wildly. That's unsettling for people.
Yeah, I mean, going back to those definitions, stability is equilibrium, it's composure and balance. So you don't want to be wildly vacillating, as you've mentioned. Exactly. So I'm not seeing any questions in the chat at the moment. Please feel free to put any questions you have for Laura or Adrienne or me. And until we get those, if Laura or Adrienne, you had anything else you wanted to share, we'll keep talking while we wait for those questions.
I can share, you mentioned earlier on about appreciative inquiry and pulling out one of the principles there. What you were referring to was the anticipatory principle. And the idea there is, instead of, we all know the phrase, I'll believe it when I see it. Appreciative inquiry offers a reframe of that, which is, I'll see it when I believe it. And so the thing here is, like that picture you showed, is to really believe something, to believe the future that you want to have, and then you can bring it forth into your reality. So instead of organizing and orienting to the problem, if you can shift your focus to what is the possibility that exists for us here? Can we orient toward that possibility? How can we articulate that so that we can move in that direction rather than just staying here in the problem space? So really bringing forth that vision and image of what you want to have happen in your organization. It doesn't mean wishful thinking and you're going to wave a magic wand, but if you can get clear on that, then that gives you some direction that you can move toward.
Great, thank you, Adrienne.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I don't see any questions, so we can just wrap up. Of course, if you have some as I'm talking, feel free to add them. Well, I already asked that. We do like to ask you at the end of each of these 40-minute sessions if there's any actionable items you can take away with you. We wanted these sessions to be something you could put into place right away. We distilled a very complicated topic down to 40 minutes. We limited the number of tools and strategies so that you could pick one and actually try to put it to work. So if you have any thoughts about how you might tame your own or your team's turbulence this week, feel free to share that with us in the chat. It might inspire some of your colleagues with ideas of how they might tame their own or their team's turbulence this week. And again, at the end of the next session, we just ask to check in. And while we're on the topic of checking in, there was one person who wrote about something they did last week with compassion, calling the mother of a friend of hers who is ill. The mother told her some things that she could do to help. Sometimes you want to show compassion, but you don't know what you can do to show compassion or how you can help. So it's just making that initial contact, that initial connection. So thank you for sharing from last week, and we'll ask you again next week if you have any thoughts on this one. Meanwhile, Laura is going to tell you a few words about us, this team that put this program together, and then I will give you a little preview of next week's session on hope, as well as what's coming to you following today's session.
Thanks, Sophie. I recognize most of the folks in the room today, so I know I don't have to belabor what it is we do. We're working on helping folks with managing change. We're developing individual employees, particularly supervisors, and we provide custom solutions as we continue to do the kind of one-on-one leadership coaching and consulting that we've always done. In addition, in these special times, we've developed some new programs for groups that are really targeted for right now, and they are targeted for. We've talked to a lot of people. They've gotten pretty used to the disjointed work from home, but the notion that we're launching into a new phase and people are not on the same page within units or departments or teams. So we've developed some group processes for folks to use in this situation. There's really 3 of them. The first is strategic resetting, and that's when you think your team might have a need to refocus. They may be, the old goals, the old activities may not be in alignment with what your stakeholders really need. So it's a group process that lets you look at that, look at where you've been, what remains constant, what remains your vision, but how you might need to adjust your strategies for getting there. So that's strategic resetting. Also offering recalibrate and recommit. So that's for units that need to settle down and focus to see beyond the budget cuts to serving their constituents in the best way possible under the circumstances. So maybe some academic advising units, some living learning programs, units like that. We think this might be good for coming back together and resetting and relaunching as we look at coming back to campus and restarting. And finally, a general managing change. You know, we all know that there's change coming in a lot of really big ways. Some of it's here already, some of it's not here yet. There's, you know, reorganizations, possibly layoffs. There's a lot of big new systems coming. There's some things that they've talked about. We can't keep doing everything we're doing. We need to do, there's some things we need to quit doing or we need to start doing really differently. This is a program really about managing your own transition as change happens around you. Again, it's a group activity designed for units, departments, teams to go through together. And, you know, all 3 of these, I think, are a good foundation for building stability back into your workplace in a really unstable time. So call us.
Okay, thanks.
You can find us on the web. You can email us, and we can give you more information about how to schedule one of these.
Thanks, Laura. Lori did put a question into the chat. If it's a question that interests other people, we'll get to that after we wrap up the program, so you can stay on another moment for that. But I did want to tell everyone that you'll be receiving a brief evaluation of this program in the next 48 hours. We've had pretty low response rate to this evaluation so far for our other 2 sessions. We'd really love to know your thoughts on these, because we want to know if we should do similar programs like this in the future, or how this is working. You know, it's not as interactive, so we don't session. So please let us hear from you afterwards with an evaluation. It's only, I think, 4 questions, pretty quick. The email with the evaluation also includes links to register for our final session in this series on hope, and also links to the recordings of the prior sessions on trust and compassion. The one on stability will be up within the next 48 hours, and actually I think we send it to you as an advanced sneak preview before we put our closed captions on it, because that takes us a few days to do. Also, there have been some really nice tips today in the chat, so if you want to save those and review the strategies that you all had for maintaining inner turmoil, inner calm, and other things that the responses to the other questions we've asked, you can save the chat, don't forget. And we thank you again for taking time out in the midst of everything that's happening to be with us here today. So that's officially the end of our program. You can sign off if you need to. I was wondering if Laura or Adrian could respond to Lori, who said the idea of communicating with, she likes the idea of communicating with people, but finds it hard to figure out what she can say versus what is not public information. They often tell us when things are confidential, but then never say at a later date, now it's okay to share this. Do you have any thoughts?
I like what Lucy Douglas suggested.
Yeah.
That's a nice sort of placeholder. Like, oh, cut and paste Lucy's words. Those are very good and helpful. And I also think that if you cannot get an answer from the people in the meeting because it's not appropriate or not the right place for it, cultivating sources that you can get back to later. Like, oh, I know you, Associate Dean, don't have time to talk to me about this, but I know this person who works under you knows when I'm allowed to talk about this and knows what I'm allowed to say. So cultivating sources at your own level where you can get high quality answers to those kinds of questions is the recommendation. Adrienne?
I'm just going to read Lucy's aloud because people who are listening to the recording can't see it. So, you know, you could even just say, I've been in a series of meetings discussing issues. I can't share everything, but I want you to know that we're addressing the budget, rotation of staffing schedules and student services. And I think I can share more in about 10 or however many days. Adrienne, were you going to add something?
Yes, I would just add, this takes some dexterity in the moment, but if you're in those meetings where those things are being discussed and you're hearing a lot of, well, don't say anything, don't say anything. Something I've tried is to sort of quickly draft what I think we could say. And so to provide that in the meeting to say, well, is it okay if we say this? Because sometimes giving someone the opportunity to say yes to that is more helpful than saying, tell me what I can say. So capturing it and providing sort of a little brief, something to respond to might get that more quickly than if you say, well, just tell us what you want us to say.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for those who hung with us for this one additional question to be answered. I don't see any other questions at the moment.
Oh, Lucy's raising her hand.
We've already,
Can I just say, to follow up on that, I work in journalism, which is like, you know, rumor central and things, you're professional gossip gatherers. And if you don't, I swear to God, they do it faster in journalism than any other department on campus. And they really, they are professionally trained to share the information.
Yeah.
So it's always a struggle to make sure that they have good information. And so if they do leak it, it actually has a basis in fact. And and this takes time to build up credibility. You can't just say this to them everywhere and never follow through. But if you can say, I understand why you're asking those questions. I have been in meetings. The provost and the president are waiting for the system to sign off on the plan on the budget. I think from what I know, there are going to be some whopper cuts, but we're protecting the staff and the faculty as much as we can. And I believe the state and the system will have signed off on this in about 10 days, but I'll keep you informed. That's all I know now. And then follow through.
I also love how your response, which is really so brilliant, also includes an operating principle, because you said we're keeping staff and faculty, I forget what you just said, but you know, you incorporated in like, however this problem comes out, this is the framework, the operating principle that we're using. So that ties right back into one of our strategies from today. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you all for hanging with us. We're a little bit over the usual end time, but we appreciate it. We had some good information we needed to still communicate. Have a wonderful week and continue to lead successfully in these challenging times.